proportional schedule is when every single classroom mirrors your student demographic, I guess you could say. So a lot of the times what happens is you have kids who struggle and maybe they have an IEP or a 504, for whatever reason, and they tend to be in the same class. Okay, and so we have had classes in the past that maybe have 23 kiddos and 13 or 14 of them really need some pretty significant targeted support. And in a reader's workshop model, that's too many kids to provide specialized support for. So the proportional scheduling model is like if 20% of your students have disabilities, that's a pretty high incident rate, but it's easy to do the math with. 20% of every class will have students with disabilities. And when you have a class of, let's say, 25 kiddos, and you're looking at only 4 of them struggling, that's the perfect space to provide targeted intervention during like a small group, like a workshop model. And what ends up happening is you end up with some classes that if you look at them, there are no kids in them that struggle. And the whole purpose of inclusive practice is practice that would work for all kids. And so when you move towards proportional scheduling, you have to obviously build that competency and get the schedule. But in Groton Dunstable, the teacher actually can provide quite a bit of supplemental intervention just through the workshop model because there's always less than 5 in every class.
The other part of that, that it's just sparkling since you said that, was that in the teacher rubric, when we're talking about teaching all students, a lot of the work that goes into that is setting up opportunities for students to collaborate with diverse peers. And so what does that mean, diverse peers? If you have classes of students that don't have or represent the demographic of the school, then you're really not allowing opportunities for kids to collaborate with diverse peers and to get different perspectives and to work together. So that's just kind of another little facet of that, but really important to think about.
Now we're going to introduce you to our next friend, okay? And Jin is, he's in 8th grade. And Jin is, we're looking at some intersectionality here because not only is he on an IEP, but he also is an English learner. So this adds another layer of supplemental support, and then we have to look at the schedule and say, but when do you get all these supports? And this is a lot of the times when we say, we're gonna just pull them out of math, we're gonna pull them out of science, we're gonna, you end up supplanting because some kids need a really significant amount of services, and our system wasn't built to provide that. Like this is not a pointing fingers thing. This is, the system wasn't built for kids like Jin, and we have to change the system so that it is.
And so the same thing, universal screener, was given a universal screener and then was given a BAS or a couple of BAS tests to kind of drill down and see where the needs are. So Jin was scoring at an overall grade 3, tested out of phonemic awareness, was at a grade 1 for phonics, tested out of high frequency words, and then interestingly enough, Jin, and these are real scores for a student that we have, but his vocabulary was at a grade 4. His comprehension for literature was at a grade 1, and his comprehension for informational text is at a grade 2. And I'm only saying that's strange is because usually when I look at these scores, vocabulary is typically low, and then comprehension is a little bit higher, so I'm just surprised to see some of that. But then when you look at the VAS scores, he was reading at a level T, 96% accurate. He had satisfactory comprehension, but then when he goes to a U, his accuracy drops way down, and his comprehension drops way down. So this is his current kind of standing. So again, we're just going to have you talk for a couple of minutes about what would be going on with Jin, what would be happening with him. No, because he has T. So he was successful with T. So you would know that maybe, but he was successful at a T, which would have been the previous. And then C2, but this is like I know the kid, and I think he's like consistent data, and like how some kids the data down. So what do you do? So that's why Russia uses this because it's a lot of this.
now share this with them, give them these examples. So our teachers usually do like, right. We actually have a giant visit planned on October 20th and 21st. We put it on like Eventbrite, it's like 70 bucks for 2 days, and I just didn't go. Like, we're not charging people money on that. We're gonna offer snacks and like lunch. But we're like doing an open house to October 20th and 21st, so you can come in and see. Yeah, and we're doing it again in the spring. I mean, everybody K-8 does intervention blocks, our preschool intervention blocks, and I'm seeing it next year. Okay. Yes.
Go back to that last slide where you said,
Hold on. Oh, here. Yeah. I'm sorry. I want to. There's a question here. Yeah.
can you just go back to that last slide when you have that child in the classroom, and yes, in a perfect world where you can have a special ed person 20% of the time in each class.
Oh no, we don't move the special ed person.
No. But say you have a school with 6 classrooms
Yep.
of each grade level.
Yep.
One special ed person.
Yep.
So obviously you can't do your model in a perfect world of, 20%.
We actually do that model in our world.
Okay, I can't do that in my school system. We don't have those resources. So how do I break down those barriers?
But we literally have the same exact thing. So we have 6 classes at Florence Roach Elementary per grade and 1 special educated teacher.
Okay.
So again, when we talk about MTSS thinking, can you do it right now? No, because IEPs need to be amended, the competency of other teachers has to be built, intervention materials have to be purchased. But like, we are on year 6 of our MTSS journey, and what we've been able to do is every class will have 4 or 5 kids with an IEP, but they're clustered based on like what their needs are. So it's not that every kid has a co-taught block. It's like these 5 kids really need a co-taught class with like a special education teacher. Okay, we'll put them in one class. The next one would be like, these kids are para-supported. And it's not an exact math, like you might have 4 in one class and 6 in another class, but like nobody is loaded and nobody doesn't have any kiddos. Mm-hmm. And then it might be, these are all the kids who are not on an IEP but need reading services, and then we can, push in like a reading specialist, during that time. So before we create any schedules or ask any teachers to create schedules, we place all of those clusters based on special education. And then we give those to the teachers and say, make your classes for next year. Because our teachers will actually, the 3rd grade teachers will create the 4th grade classrooms based on, this is this kid's only friend in the world, these 2 are not, the best together. So I would say, like, the biggest shift is that everybody becomes responsible for teaching all students, but to do that, we needed to adopt a new curriculum because, so now we have Lucy Calkins, which provides a lot of time for that small group instruction.
We have Lucy Calkins as well, we have LLI.
Yep.
I'm just saying, when you have one special ed teacher,
Yep.
and say you've got 20 students, you can't clump them all together, and I'm having a hard time trying to understand, and I understand we're not where you are yet.
Mm-hmm.
How do I go back to my district and try to solve this problem without the resources?
I mean, I think that's where MTSS comes in, because I don't think it's a problem that you can solve right away. Like, I think that the strategy behind it is like, you need to change the mindset so everybody says, those kids could be really successful in my classroom because I have the strategies for that. You have to look at adopting a new schedule, possibly. But we, at our entire elementary school, we have 800 kids at one of our elementary schools, and we have, I think, only 4 special educators. So it's 5 grades, 4 special educators, 800 students. And we do have other supports, like we do have 3 reading specialists, for example. We have a math interventionist. So there's other things like that. But when we started the work 5 years ago, we didn't have any of those people either. So we were in a very similar, like there would be 1 special education class that would have, maybe 2, and then you'd have 3 or 4 classes that did not have a single student who had any really significant academic needs, not to say they didn't have other needs. But I think that the systems thinking is like, just start picking off one thing a year of like, okay, what do we need to do? And you have to work, if you're not the special ed director, the special education director and I spent so much time together. We worked with our CPAC, because sometimes parents are like, I don't want I don't want everybody kind of pushed in. So we spent a lot of time with like our special education director, all of our team chairs, which I know every district calls them something different, but essentially the special education coordinators, and we actively started thinking about like, how are we going to write these IEPs differently? Because if you're bound by IEPs that require co-teaching with a special educator, you have to put them all together. You have no other option. Legally, that's what you have to do. So like, that is a barrier where you say, okay, fine, this class of kids, as they're moving, this is what it's gonna be. But as like kindergarten and first grade and second grade teacher, kids are coming in and they're being identified as special education, the question is like, what services do they actually need? Like based on research, based on the continuum of services, and that requires a lot of conversations with like special education staff as well. But it's a long road, because again, I'm not gonna put a student in a classroom that's restrictive. We can't legally do it. If the kid's not making progress, you can't place students there. So that's why that competency driver is like, how do you build competency? How do you work with families and communities and CPACs so they understand the importance of inclusion? How do you create a schedule where that kid can get an extra bump just with that special educator? So we have like 50 minutes a day that we call the win block, what I need. And like a kid who really struggled would then get an extra 50 minutes. So like a special educator could take all of the students who really need those services on the grid, and there'd be a time to give them. But like there's so many pieces to the puzzle that it's like you just have to start with one, and putting that one in place. But it took us 5 or 6 years to be able to do it. And we're not there yet 100%, because at our high school, we're not instituting our win block until next year, which is 2021. So we've been doing some other things at the high school as well. Hold on, there was a question there. Yeah.
I just want to share from the High School in Boston.
Yeah.
And we started our inclusion classes, I'd say 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah.
But one of the things that we really push is to generate the will for our regular ed teachers to go out and get their special ed certification. And that's been happening little by little, because our district gives priority to teachers that have the dual certification or triple certification. You get ESL, SPED, and whatever content. So we've been doing that, and we are able to have a model similar to yours, where we have some classes with push-ins, some classes with parents, and some pull-outs.
We've been doing a very similar thing, but we also reverse it. So like at the high school, we supported our one special educator to get the math license. Mm-hmm. So it's not only getting dual certified teachers, general ed teachers to become special ed teachers, but getting special ed teachers to become regular ed teachers. And the really interesting thing about the moderate license training is you can do it with one graduate class and 150-hour rigorous internship. So like as a district, you do have the legal capacity to create a 150-hour internship with your best special educators. It could be an after-school program, for example. And then you just have to put like the logging as evidence of like these 150 hours happened, and then they tell you like what the hours have to be in. So like you have to provide 10 hours of direct instruction in terminology with mild and moderate disabilities. 10 hours in working with outside agencies and wraparound services and things like that. But there are definite opportunities to dual certify some of your general education teachers. 150 hours is a long time of face-to-face direct, but like again, it's a long-term goal. And then there was a gentleman over here. What was your question?
I was just going to ask you if you could describe what your win block looks like.
Yeah. So the win block is a 50-minute period. And I have to tell you that different schools are treating this a little bit differently, because what happened at first is when we created this new schedule, now when you take time from something, there is a loss, okay? And so like, to lengthen your school day is gonna cost you a collectively bargained agreement and a ton of money, because you're gonna have to pay for those extra minutes somewhere, and that was not in the cards for us. So one of the things that you have to do is you have to take minutes from somewhere else. Now, this is painful to say out loud because there's no ideal situation, but like at the elementary school, we drop science and social studies to a half hour every other day, which there's no perfect solution to this that I know of, so like the work is difficult. We did add an elective or a IA or whatever you want to call it, which is like an engineering course starting in kindergarten. So like, you know, that way instead of just going to a computer class where they're kind of playing on computer games, it's like a legit engineering course. And so like that supplemented the science a little bit. Social studies, and we make an effort to integrate it into reading, but like there's a loss whenever there's a game. Okay, so that's full disclosure. So at the middle school, we are also now down to 48-minute periods, which is like really short. Our high school has a block, so it's a lot easier to take from a block because you're going from like a 95 to like an 87. So that being said, we have 50 minutes a day and no new instruction happens. And so the way that it's designed, like at one of the elementary schools, they do a regrouping approach, which means like if you have 4 third grade teachers off, plus a special educator, you have 5 people to regroup kids. And we use the iReady because the iReady will provide you with instructional intervention groupings. So it'll screen your kiddos and it will be like, these 8 kids are really above grade level. These are some activities you could do with those kids. We tend to not be great yet at meeting the needs of accelerated kids in that way block. A lot of the times it looks like if you are going to be getting intervention, we're gonna pull the kids who are struggling first. So it might be that one teacher says, I'm gonna do phonics, another teacher says, I'm gonna do the math intervention, someone else says, I'm gonna work on, you know, visualizing, and then the other teachers will just kind of put 35, 40 kids in a room, and then there'll be like a menu on a slide, because these are the kids that don't need intervention, and it's like, you can play reflex math, you can we have this news thing for elementary is like a pet of the week. You have to like create a presentation of why your pet is the best pet, and then it goes on the news. Like it's those kind of activities. Another school, instead of regrouping, you end up doing kind of like a walk to intervention model, where you know like the kids that are in a cohort always stick together and they move together. And then other teachers decide, in my own class, I just want to do intervention with my own kids. So like I'm gonna take these 6 kids and then everyone else, it's like the menu again. You can design your own website. You know, you can revise your literature essay. So we've tried to provide teachers, because it's still new, with some autonomy, because otherwise there was a lot of talk of this is an extra prep, which would have made it non-contractual. So again, these are the realities of the work. And so we're like, you know, we don't want you to prep something. We want you to continue to really intervene with the kids that you already have. So different grades and different schools are in very different places. But we are seeing some really nice gains. So I think that there are a couple of different models that can be successful. The middle school is the same thing, like by grade, like 5th grade would decide what is your win block going to look like. So the 5th grade teachers can either say, we're gonna keep our kids in our own classroom, or we're gonna regroup and shift, but like different grades do different things.
So every class is 4 minutes.
Every class, yes, correct. There was like one question, yes, and then in the back.
Right now, our high school is disproportional in scheduling.
Yeah.
All of we have 3 levels, and students with disabilities are in the lowest level. The students who are ELs are automatically put in that lower level. How does your high school look that would be different as kids select schedules and a lot of other factors? We don't just look at our grade
So
levels
we
and-
did an amazing thing. My high school principal is actually presenting across the hall on scheduling. So look at his presentation, like, cause it's in the folder. We have effectively in 3 subjects, and again, this is no perfect, there's no perfect solution to this. It's not, you know, we're doing some things really well, and there's some things that we have yet to do well. But I think this is something we're doing really well. Is what the high school has a very different push, because if you're in the high school, there is an accountability measure for access to advanced coursework. Okay, so like you have to show that your lowest performing students who have the highest needs are taking your honors and AP courses. And so that is, if you're not making growth towards your own target, you will not hit that accountability measure. So that's the kind of the background. And so we basically said to the teachers, like, listen, we had 4 levels. CP2, which is the lowest, CP1, which I guess is kind of normal college prep, honors, and then in some cases accelerated honors of the same course. Like Algebra 2, 4 levels, World U.S. history 4 levels. And so one of the things that we did is year 4 of our MTSS plan, we basically said this schedule is too restrictive because we don't have, like, there's not a lot of prerequisites to get into honors courses. It's just like, if you have to be in the CP2 math and you only have 4 blocks a semester and an honors course is running at the same time, like, it's just kids end up like tightening into a schedule, even if in theory, any kid could try to take an AP class. Like, we don't, you know, we might say, just know how rigorous it is, but we said to our teachers, in 4 years, we want to eliminate leveling, okay? A lot of districts are moving in this direction. I know Cambridge, anyone here from Cambridge? Cambridge is moving in that direction. Lexington is moving in that direction of, like, all kids deserve access to, like, really high quality curriculum. And if US history is US history, and if it's designed and differentiated, all students can be successful. And so we basically said, this is our 4-year plan. We're not gonna go nuts about this, but we're gonna start doing it. And our English department, our history department, and our world language department just said, kill them now. We don't need them. So this year, in our high school, those 3 departments don't have any levels at all. And so that is how we dealt with it. And I was like, I was gonna give it 4 years of transition, and they were like, we'll just do it. So world language, every class is honors. We do the OWL method, which is organic world language. So there's no books. It's the way kids learn to speak. So, like, you're gonna go in and you're gonna speak Spanish the whole time. You're gonna play games, you know, Latin, same thing. Math and science said we'll do it from the senior year back. So our senior year is not leveled. They can either take an AP class, AP Stats, AP Calc, you know, BC or AB, or they can take Advanced Algebra Trig, and that's broken into 2 classes, which are both dual enrollment. So your senior year, regardless, you will take an AP or a dual enrollment class. Science is doing the same thing. So we're gonna work our way back to freshman year, and that was just their own strategy. But I know that other districts are, Cambridge, what is Cambridge doing? Do you know what the phase in or phase out is of levels?
Oh, I can see it there.
Yeah, I
So 2 years ago, we started planning for de-leveling English.
Okay.
And actually, we actually thought we might try to do English and social studies at the same time, and we were advised not to do that. So basically what we've done is everyone is taking honors. We've made honors classes in English, so when it's a 9th grade student, you're automatically taking honors. We've done some work around making sure that the curriculum is standards aligned and that the expectations are the same for all. And one thing that we have done is included a seminar for students who might have some difficulty keeping
So you double block them? That's what we do
yeah.
too.
And again, it's not ideal. It does take away a little bit of choice from the students in terms of what they can take. And sometimes, and I'm not as familiar with the high school schedule.
Yep.
I mean, you described it as it's really challenging. But we're in our 2nd year with ELA in our 1st year of social studies, and it's challenging, but it's going well. We have some data systems in place where we've done a survey. We've done a student survey in the fall and then before the spring, and we're really trying to make sure that we're being accountable for keeping those expectations where they need to be. And you know, it's a little tricky with MCAS right now as a, you know, not in flux, but our 1st year without doing the legacy. So anyway, it's actually really inspiring to see students believe in themselves, and you know, we'll see. And we're going to hopefully start thinking about science and
Yeah.
math as well.
But like the hard thing about this work is there's no linear path, you know, because all of us have different resources and different things in place. And you know, when you go through that MTSS self-assessment, you know, if we all sat together, there'd be some places that you're like, we already have that. And for everything you have, a district is like, we don't have that yet. So we're not coming from the same place, which makes the journey, you know, go a little longer. And again, like there's ups and downs, you know, all over the place. You know, it's not like everything you do is really effective. Like overall, our overall data improves every single year, but certainly there's some years where like you're looking at a grade or a class or a pocket, and it's like, what happened here? You know, so there's still a lot of work. There's no, you know, there's no perfect system. It's just like, this is what the research and evidence suggests is really effective, and we have to start moving in that direction the best way that we can. And when we lack the resources, like in Groton Dunstable, we did not, I mean, it's a well-off community, but like we didn't have, you know, the money that you spend is the money you spend. You're not getting any more money. Like our community voted down an override. So we actually hired an external auditor. I forget what they're called. But we basically had an auditor come in and say, where could we save money? Like we feel like we can't cut anything. Like where can we cut things? And of course they could come up with like a million little things, and there were 3 huge things that they said, these will give you a lot of money to get a lot more staff. And those 3 things were, I mean, and again, this is like in some ways, it feels terrible to do these things. The first one was to outsource our custodians and our cafeteria. So, I mean, these are people who have been working in the district 30 years in some cases, who know every kid's name, you know, who are like amazing employees. The financial benefit of doing that is you no longer pay benefits because you're required, because you're such a big organization. You know, we're in the Government Insurance Commission, the GIC. A family benefit is $20,000. So even though the pay is going to be the same, you're hiring a company to pay the same, but now you're saving $20,000 per person who was in the district before. Another thing that they suggested was, many of you, if you provide public transportation and busing, your buses are likely not all 100% full, okay? And so what they did is they did an analysis on our ridership, and like especially at your high school, when kids have cars, like there's a ton of empty seats. So there's this like crazy software that's like, blah, 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 like takes the kids' addresses out of like school brains, and is like, if these are the kids that take the buses, the bus routes get longer. You know, so you're putting kindergartners in a bus, which like for a decent chunk of more time, but like every bus is looking at costing you, $80,000, a year in upkeep and drivers and things. And then the third one was to get rid of our central office. So it was like kind of divide and conquer, go somewhere else. You know, the schools aren't 100% full. You know, there's a classroom here, there's a portable here, and if you can get out of that building, right? So those are 3 things that we did, and all of them had like really huge, negative downside. You know what I'm saying? Like, but overall, we decided that those were the 3 things that we were going to do, and in total, you save millions of dollars, and then you start to say, let's hire some more math interventionists, let's get more technology and things like that. But it's definitely worth doing once, just because some things those are things that we did not think about or didn't think it was even legal in some cases, to outsource a collectively bargained unit. But when the contract is up, apparently it is. Any other districts do that? Yeah, question?
Do you provide your related services during your wing block?
It depends. For some kids, yes, but some kids have so many services.
That's what I was going to ask. Because they get multiple services, is the wing block enough for them
No.
not to be missing
No.
courses?
No. For a kid who needs OT, PT, speech, EL, yeah.
That's not going to be enough. Even 60 minutes, 5 days a week is not going to be enough.
Correct.
Like say you have 3 hours for
Yep.
EL and 2 hours for speech.
So again, some kids who need many services, might in some ways would probably do, you try to pull from science and social studies first. We would never pull from one of the IAs or the electives. You push in as much as you can. But, when you look at inclusion rates, the national inclusion rate is 62%, and we're like 92% in Groton Dunstable, which is not 100%. Okay? Every student is included, but it might be 40%. But 92% of our kids with disabilities are included 80% or more. But still, it's not 100%. And so, we're moving in the right direction. So, all kids are going to be in an English class together. And you have a couple of kids that we're still trying to figure out, how do we remove the barriers, or how do we provide more services. We're starting to use consultants for some of the services, just because if you have one person trying to get to 6 schools, that's a lot different than paying 6 people hourly to come into a school. So it's all a work in progress.
thinking about teacher buy-in, and when you have something where you D-level, then you have an honors English class or an English class, and they're all in the, and all the students are in the English class, and you have teachers who are still concerned about, if I give a menu while I'm working with this small group, and I have a menu of options for my other students, well, Johnny's just gonna screw around and play on his computer for 45 minutes, because that, how do you answer to when you're trying to move teachers in this new direction? How do you answer to those who might be skeptical in that way?
I mean, you're the one putting together the choices. So, I mean, you have to design opportunities that you feel are meaningful for students. And I think that people who are really concerned about that would have really targeted options. So, like, I think that's some of the importance is we're saying, like, you're driving your win block, like, you recognize there are some kids who need more. This is an opportunity for you to give more to the kids who need more when they need it. And, you know, what you decide you want your other students to do. Like, I know one of my teams, they're kind of teaching additional, like, passion electives. So, like, there's, like, a 7th grade English teacher who's teaching culture, but no, geography teacher who's teaching culture, but she's doing, like, a little mini elective, like a 4-week elective on understanding culture through short foreign films. You know, you're, like, 10 minutes or less kind of films. And so it's like the kids will all share this experience of watching this, like, 5 or 10 minute film, but then it's all about, like, what everything we learned about the culture. You know, and so some teams said, like, you 3 are gonna be the intervention people, and we'll take kids for kind of these passion projects. And then you're just doing the same thing all year 4 weeks at a time. You know, so there's a lot of different options. The high school, we're looking to do it next year. One of the things they're thinking about too is if you have that much time every day and you have kids who maybe do not need intervention, could you allow them to take an additional class in virtual high school? Because of, you know, that amount of time a day you can get through a class. So, like, you know, do we want to allow for an additional class where we have, like, a big common area where you don't have to report to an intervention or enrichment if you signed up for a class? So, you know, there's no good answer here. There's a lot of options, and I think that working with your teachers is the way to get the buy-in. Because we didn't say to the teachers, like, we're doing this year, we're like, tell us in 4 years how we can get to a place that we want to be at. And then because they said this is what we want to do, there was no pushback at all. Yeah.
Can I ask a little bit about what your involvement was as the assistant superintendent in making some of the changes, culture changes 6 years ago that the schools are dealing with? So I'm an elementary principal, but at the elementary level, you're changing minds, changing systems and structures and resources, or at least the way that it's used, building capacity. How did you, what involvement did you have with those principals?
So the first thing that we do is we make sure that we have, like, an MTSS task force in the district, which is made up of all central office administrators, all building principals, and then teachers from every single school. And there's more teachers on it than there are administrators on it. So our MTSS task force is the group that creates the district improvement plan. So in a lot of districts, administrators create the district improvement plan. In our district, it would be more teachers than administrators who actually craft and draft the improvement plan. So, you know, once we kind of decide as a group of people, like, this is what we want to kind of tackle this year, this is what would be a reasonable goal, then I provide professional development to my principals for 3 hours every other week. So we have something called the school leadership team meeting and there's, I think, 18 total, like, central office and building evaluators. So it could be an assistant principal. We're a smaller district, but we all come together every other Friday from, like, 8 until 11:30 for professional development.
MTSS and issues with MTSS.
It's all inclusive practice PD. Yep. And then both the superintendent and I go out into sites and we'll spend a full morning with every principal once a month. And that's like, what's going on, how can we support you? And then we'll walk through all of the classrooms with them, you know, trending on what happens. I also another day a week walk through every classroom in the entire district at least once every 2 months. So what I do is if I walk through and I see examples of inclusive practices, I will then write to the teacher, CC the principal. This is not punitive. Like, if I don't see him, it's kind of like, I just walked into a bad time, like, great job. But when I do see things that like are really promising practices, I'll then write to like everyone and their mother and say, hey, I loved walking through your classroom. I saw that you did this. Would you be willing to share that at a faculty meeting? Would you be able, would you do a 5-minute mini lesson or ed camp style and show people what that is? So like a lot of the times it feels like all of this is really new, but if you take everything we want, someone is doing it somewhere. It's just how do we bring it together so everyone's doing all of these things? But like every teacher in your school is like gonna be the best at something. And it's like elevating and celebrating the things we're doing well and then sharing. So again, it's through a lot of professional development. Our principals have a lot of autonomy in like, we create the district improvement plan together, but then they and their teachers who are on the MTSS task force create their school improvement plan. And they always align, but it's basically what can I do to help you to meet your plan? Do you want me to come to faculty meetings? And then walking through and spending a lot of time in classrooms.
It sounds like a very narrow focus. You have a positive, a really narrow focus on inclusive practice. That's
Yes. Yep. Because like a lot of people, I know a lot about UDL, I do a lot of presenting on UDL, but like in my district, we talk about MTSS. UDL is a component of MTSS. We don't have a UDL task force. Like this is all about how do we create a system where all kids can learn, and every year we get closer to that. And in some ways we're probably ahead of some of you in some ways, and you're going to be ahead of us in some ways. Like we're just starting this year with our social emotional learning initiative. So I'm sure we could like visit your classrooms and be like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. We're just all coming at it from different levels. Yeah, and one more question, I'm going to go to this real quick.
Do you have a piece of that plan that's some kind of learning walk or whatever you want to call it with the actual building principals with each other in the different buildings?
Yep, we have done that before. Like we started doing it where we would all meet, we'd all meet at one elementary school and then we'd all walk through together. It took a lot of time for us to get places, so we started calibrating with videos instead because there just wasn't so much movement. So we did try it, and it was kind of hard to pull together. So again, in GD, like with a kiddo like this, what we say to teachers is like, if you feel like you don't know how to meet the needs of these kids, that's on us. Like we have to build the competency so you feel like you can teach all students. So like you just have to advocate. I will never be upset ever if a teacher's like, I don't really know what to do, but I don't want to hear this kid can't do it. And so like really changing mindsets to create a culture to say like, it's okay that you don't know what to do because we haven't taught you how to do that yet, but we have to know. And so it's creating a culture where like failure is okay. That you can say to your evaluator, I'm really struggling with this kid. Like, I believe he can learn. I just am not sure how to get him there. And like, we've really created a culture. Kelly's my colleague. She's the ELA supervisor in the district. So when we're speaking about ELA, like people will come to her all the time and be like, help. And they're like, okay, no problem. Let me come in. Let me model a lesson. Like, this is really hard. Like, there's things that you know that I don't know. So some schools are further along than others. But as a district, we always say, like, I don't know what to do sometimes. Like I look at data and I'm like, I believe we can change the data and I'm not quite sure how anymore, okay? So I need my own PD. I need to go to other conferences. I need to see what you're all doing. I need to read, right? That's an okay feeling. Like obviously we don't all know what we're doing because we wouldn't have these barriers. That's the work, it's okay. The second thing is like, what we were recognizing is like, I don't wanna like test kids to goodness gracious, but like you need a picture of what kids are struggling with. So it can't just be like this one test, because as you can see, this is like so incredibly at odds with each other. It doesn't look like the same kid is being tested. It's like, but if this is like a 5th grade reading level, why is he getting a 1st grade there? This is a real kid with real data. And he's a kid that's a complicated kid, right? But we have to start saying, what else do we need? Like, and I don't mean necessarily, like, it could be common assessments. It could be observations. It could be, working with the VCBA in the district community. Like, can you come in and watch this kid for maybe 15 minutes? Like, maybe I'm missing something here, but like, I just don't understand why I'm getting this data. The student study team process, which we all have, looking at your student study team process as an opportunity to like really look at the DCAP, which is the District Curriculum Accommodation Plan, of saying like, what have we tried that's like strong practice? Like, what do we still need to try? We do create intervention plans. Now, this is like, some kids are on an IEP, but before we would put a student on an IEP, we would give them an intervention plan of like, what is the classroom teacher gonna do? What is gonna happen during wind block? Who does the classroom teacher need to consult with? Because sometimes, again, like as you're saying in the back, there's only one teacher. She can't be in 5 classrooms at once. But like, is there a time that I could consult with her for 15 minutes, you know, in the schedule, so I could be like, can you help me? You know, doing a lot of progress monitoring. And then what we did is we threw away our faculty meetings in favor of something that we called Win Wednesdays, which like, you could call a data meeting, but it's not a data meeting. It's like, let's look at data and plan what we're gonna do about the kids for whom we feel like they need more. And then you have every voice at the table. So like, I as a classroom teacher am like sitting with the whole 3rd grade team, but then the English language, you know, the ELL teacher is there and a special educator is there, and it's like, okay, everybody, as all of us, like let's look at the data, which kids are you most worried about, and now what are we gonna specifically do for those kiddos? So we called it Win Wednesdays instead of Data Wednesdays, because it's like, what do our kids need who we are not yet effective in bringing them up? And then you are kind of crowdsourcing. Have you tried that, or one strategy that works well, or hey, let me come in and see that. So that's kind of where we are at the elementary school. Where we're at with the more secondary is like, what's really, really important at the secondary is the schedule is a bear. It's a bear. Like, there's just so many different things going on, and the block schedule makes it even harder because you only get 4 classes a semester. That's it. And if one of them has to be Learning Center, and one of them has to be ELA, and one of them has to be math, like, you're kind of struggling of like, when do we provide the special education services? When do we provide the English language services? So, you know, some of the things that we are doing is, again, we try to cluster kids. We do have a co-taught class. So one of our honors English classes is co-taught. You know, and again, who are the kids who best meet that criteria? And it might be a little more than, I think our high school is 10% incident. So like maybe there's 10, you know, maybe there's 15%. It's not, I mean, these are children, these are not exact numbers. But what we try to do is say, everyone's teaching all students. And so, you know, we try to make sure that, like, you know, there'll be a class that's really focusing on, you know, more nuclear aspects of literacy. We do have a learning center, but we did something really cool with learning center this year. Our enrollment is decreasing a little bit, and so, you know, technically we could have dropped like a math section and still kept classes in like our kind of school committee parameters. And so what we ended up doing is we took the English department head and the math department head, who are, you know, your strongest in many ways at content, and we dropped them a class, but then assigned them to the learning center. So your kids who are special education learning center, which again, it's a bear because it only happens one block, has a licensed reading specialist, dual certified as an English teacher, an amazing math teacher, and a special educator. And that's like a 90-minute block. You know, so it's like, if I can't provide the math support in a co-taught class, I can reverse push the teachers in the learning center. And then the same thing is, like, technically, let's say that it was a learning center day that the math gentleman is doing work, that allows the reading teacher / English teacher department head to then push into a class. You know, so that model has been really good. This is the first year we're playing with it, but it seems to be really awesome. And then again, the reading intervention services, as you said, we've added a class. So you're going to be in honors English. One class is honors English, one class is learning center. Now we're going to put you in literacy lab. And the literacy lab is a class that you either can sign up for because you are really need like really targeted reading support, like comprehension support, but it also has this additional layer of you want to become a reading peer tutor. So there's like a lot of instruction in basic literacy, but kids can take the class who are honors, you know, very strong students to learn about language development so they can become a peer tutor through the National Honor Society. So it's kind of a full class. And that leaves one. You know, and so like that, again, the schedule is like, and so that's what he's talking about right now is like, you know, do we create a different schedule? You know, what do we do? And so like, as we're just thinking about this, what we know is that what we want is for kids to grow. iReady is a nationally normed test, and essentially you want your kids to grow 100% a year. You want 1 year of typical growth. These are just the kids in our district who got supplemental reading intervention, which means they got reading intervention, but they were also in an English class. And when you look at that data, by the mid-year growth, where they want you to be between 40 and 60%, all of these kids had already made a year and a half of growth in a semester. So the model of like layering of supports, again, this doesn't mean every kid made growth, but the average aggregate is our kids who are struggling with literacy are growing, in some cases, 3 years of growth in a year for being a part of really high-level Tier 1 instruction, and then also getting a reading intervention, and then in some cases getting another block of it in a learning center. So some of these kids are getting literally triple literacy support. And that's kind of like what the model is. And we're seeing, this is just grade 5, 6, 7, and 8, but you can see at the halfway point, okay, is what we want to see here is 50%, and we've actually seen more growth than that. So it has been effective. The research base behind this, what we're trying to do, we don't do it perfectly. It's first of all, the research says that the 5 most important ways to increase the achievement of students who are behind in literacy is you have to schedule time for intervention with sufficient intensity and duration. It's got to be targeted. So you've got to create a schedule where kids can get intervention without missing Tier 1 instruction. Number 2, group students by skill deficit and then regroup as necessary. These kids are struggling with this, what are we going to do for kiddos who fit this profile? In addition to core instruction. The walk to intervention model is again this concept of if I'm the best at this thing, I should be doing intervention with that thing, even for kids who are not mine. So walk to intervention means the kids go to the best person, which means that you have a much more flexible idea of what does it mean to be assigned to a teacher. Okay, so the research says move the kids around. If you have 5 5th grade teachers that are stopping at the same time, don't keep your kids. Specialize your kids. The next is obviously, being a part of just the community, of making sure that are your interventionists able to talk to your teachers? With one special ed teacher working with 6 teachers, the answer is probably no. How can you collaborate with 6 teachers? So it's also looking at that collaboration time, consult time. And then again, there's research-based, evidence-based curriculum materials. We gotta get those into teachers' hands or it becomes a planning nightmare. You might not have the money for it yet, but then that's starting to think about how do we get the money to do it. So that's the really strong research base, and if you want the references, they're right there. And so just kind of this reflection is what are the barriers in your district that is preventing you from implementing the evidence-based strategies? And the answer to all of those things is going to be MTSS. You can go into this bit.ly if you want. It's kind of a cool little website where you can put in the barrier that you face. You don't have to do it that way. But we know what works, but the barriers are so real. They're so real. It's not just well, then get a new schedule with intervention. You're teachers are saying it's another prep. We can't do that because of collectively bargained agreements. We only have one special educator. We can't possibly break it up like that. All of these things, that's why this is so big. And I think the best place to start is just go through your self-assessment and just say, what do we have in place yet? What do we not have? And then if we were to get all of these things in 7 years, what would the order of this likely have to be? You have to find money before you can spend money. You got to change a collectively bargained agreement before you can add a schedule. This takes work. So again, really quickly here, also if you're trying to figure out what are the best intervention materials, the What Works Clearinghouse is is the state, and it goes through the actual evidence-based research on what works. But what's really cool is some of the programs that you're using, it might be a green light for students with disabilities and a red light for English language learners. Because some programs are not great for different profiles of kids, and that's why they talk about you need a program that fits your kids. There's just gotta be a match. And the What Works Clearinghouse and also the Curate project, which is a state project, is trying to let you know who is this actually good for, because like not all programs are good for all kids. So it might be like, this is a great program unless you have English language learners, and then you're like, but we have 40% English language learners. Don't adopt that program. Okay, it's not the best thing for you, whereas in a population that's low incidence, it might be a better choice. So the last part here is just like, how are the experiences of these students if they were in Groton Dunstable, which again, I'm not saying that we're further along everywhere. We've done a pretty good job in some places, but we have a really long way to go when you're thinking about like PBIS and responsive classroom and SEL. This is just where we put our attention, and we've seen a lot of gains based on the work that we put in here, knowing that there's still a lot more work to do in other places. But these are just questions that you can kind of ask yourself, and I'll bop around if you have any individual questions for me. And then just to see the schedule, what time was this supposed to end? And then we have to add 10 minutes to it. 12:20. Okay, so it's actually 12:30. So we have 10 minutes for you to just kind of look this over, ask these questions, reflect on them, and I'll swerve, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask.